Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I am Adam Lundy, and I am joined by my co-host Chris Haskell.
Hello.
Hey, Chris, Happy New Year!
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year! We're without Zach today. Don't worry, we
Mm.
didn't kick him or anything. He just was unavailable. He will be back next time around, hopefully, if everything goes to plan. Obviously, this is our first episode of 2024. We had a couple of weeks off, which was nice. I planned to watch a bunch of movies and didn't get around to doing that
Yep.
because people don't tell you that Christmas is so busy.
Who would have thunk it?
They would have thought that Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff, the holiday period in general, is so busy. Um, you will probably notice if you're watching this on YouTube, we're here on YouTube. This is our first I think it's our first episode that we're gonna sort of try and simultaneously release. It might not release exactly on the same day. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, don't be weirded out if you go to the YouTube and you don't see the video yet. They might not be exactly simultaneously released, but if you're watching me, the podcast version is 100% out at this stage.
That's right.
Yeah, cool. So to kick things off, obviously we have a few films to talk about. Obviously, that's why we're back. We have a few Otsu films that we're gonna tip through. Um, we just gonna start off. We'll do any other business. I'm sure we've all done. We've got a lot of pickups over for Christmas and all that kind of stuff. So we'll talk about that. Just beforehand, just want to give a kind of like a preview or a teaser or whatever we want to call it, for what's going to be coming up this year, on the podcast. So
I'm
we
intrigued.
we yeah, well, I would hope you would know, Chris. Uh, we touched on this a little bit at the end of the last episode in our 2023 wrap up episode. Um, but essentially, we're obviously business as usual in regards to our format that we've been rolling with throughout 2023, and I think we started in 2022, where we are just going theme by theme. We're each taking turns picking some movies. This was obviously Chris's pick this time. Despite not being with us, Zach has picked his films for next time, so we'll go through those at the end of the episode as well. We'll have some interviews. Chris already is already working hard on lining up some interviews for this year, so that's cool. So that's all going to continue. The interviews have become a real cornerstone of our content, so it's great that we can keep that going. Um, One thing that we're going to do during the year, we have one planned for not too far away in the future. We don't know how many of these we're going to do. It's kind of going to depend on the feedback and the listen numbers and stuff like that. But one thing we decided that we're going to do is try and do director or series runs. So over the course of a few weeks, we're going to go through the filmography of a director or a particular series. This kind of came off the back of the Scream run through that we did in Halloween of
Hmm.
2023, which was a lot of fun just to kind of go through a
Mm.
series and kind of see how it develops and stuff like that. So we're going to start off with a director. It's a very, very well-known director. I'm not going to tell you who it is now, but it's an extremely, extremely well-known, well-renowned director. A short enough filmography. I think it's going to take us maybe 3 or 4 episodes to cover his filmography in total. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be coming in the kind of near enough future. And depending on, how things go, we're going to continue that kind of in increments throughout the year. We'll maybe do another one during the summer, another one then maybe in sort of the autumn time as we wrap up the year. We're not gonna overload you with directors, especially if we end up picking one that you don't particularly like.
True. Yeah.
Um, the only other big thing that will be happening during the year is, as alluded to, I think in the last episode, I am going to be becoming a father in April. So naturally, I'm going to be taking some time away, but that doesn't mean the podcast is going to be finished during that time. So I'm going to need a few months just to life, just to live life for a few months away from everything, spending time with my family and stuff like that. So during that couple of months where I'm going to be on some LOA, obviously Chris is going to be doing interview episodes as normal, but in terms of like normal episode output, you're still going to have normal discussion episodes.
Mm.
But Chris and Zach are going to use this as an excuse to probably watch films that I would normally say no to. So expect Takashi Miike, expect
Hmm.
Cat, whatever, what do they call it? Cat 4, what are they
Cat
called?
three. Cat three.
Cat 3,
That's right.
expect you
Mhm.
know, the I spit on your
Exploitation in general.
grave, exploitation. Yeah, all the stuff that I would normally say no to, expect that. So if you're into the more hardcore side of film, those couple of months will definitely pique your interest. That's probably going to be end of April into May, probably into June a little bit, and we'll see where I'm fixed from there.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's going to be a fun year. It's going to be a different year. Obviously, we're part of this podcast network as well. So that's really cool. We'll
Yep.
maybe have some collaborations during the year as well. We'll see how things develop on that front. And we're going to try and put out more YouTube videos. Obviously, like I said, if you're watching, if you see my face right now, you're on YouTube right now. So we're going to try and do this a little bit more often. And kind of try and tap into this space. I know it's been something that we've been flirting with for a while. We're
Mhm.
not very not very consistent with our
We've been just
content.
tickling it a little bit.
Yeah, just kind of getting the testing the waters.
Mhm.
So we're gonna try and do this a little bit more throughout the year as well, depending on time. Because we all work full-time jobs. This is not our full-time job. We do this for fun, ultimately.
Right.
We're here for the love of it. So uh, time is a factor that we have to take into account when we're deciding what kind of content we're going to put out. Yeah,
Absolutely.
cool.
It's just, I can imagine a scenario where between April and June we're just doing a James Cameron run or something.
You know
Because
what?
Zach just
Wouldn't be the
chooses
worst.
yeah.
Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. His filmography can't be that long.
No, what depends?
Because he
He's done all the
spends so
Transformer
long.
movies.
Oh, that's true. It depends if you're gonna do his true filmography as opposed to,
The Cameron Bay.
yeah. He's
Um,
actually made very little films looking at it. Like if you don't like if you not that I'm a Piranha 2, you know, denialist or whatever you want to call it, but if you don't count Piranha 2, he only has 8 movies.
hmm,
So
okay.
it's very, very doable.
And if you
I'm
go into like
surprised.
the depth of his stories, that's only about 30 minutes of content.
Wow. Wow. Well, speaking of James Cameron, in terms of films that I did manage to watch over the holiday period, I only
Mm,
managed to watch a couple. I did manage to watch Titanic, which is the first time I've seen Titanic for a few years. So I got the 4K
mm,
release that came out. This is not actually technically mine. I bought this for my wife because Titanic is her favorite film. And she's been waiting to see it in 4K for a long, long time. So when I saw it was finally announced, I pre-ordered it and I was getting it as part of her Christmas presents, but then it was like they didn't have it in stock and they didn't know when they were going to get it in stock. But luckily, it arrived the week before Christmas. After I had already wrapped all her presents, another thing came. I was like, God damn, I need to wrap something else now. Um, but yeah, we watched that on New Year's Eve, I think, if I remember correctly. I had a good time. This it's a technically really good film.
mm, mm.
From a technical standpoint.
Did they
Um,
survive in this cut?
I can't be giving out spoilers. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I refuse to give out spoilers. Um, but yeah, no, it's long. You know, it is what it is. It's Titanic. It's a long film. Um, but it's a technical marvel. It's crazy how technically good that film is. So we watched that. A few other pickups that I got over the holiday period because I didn't watch much else. Let me just double check my letterboxd here. They said I watched Titanic. I watched, oh yes, the internet phenomenon that is Saltburn. Um,
Ooh.
if you've been on social media or TikTok or whatever in the last couple of weeks since Saltburn released on streaming on Amazon Prime, the world has become obsessed with Saltburn. It is it seems to be the filtered film of 2023, so it's either a film you love or hate. You either like it's a wild watch. I'm not gonna give spoilers or anything like that. The ending is like a little bit predictable and a little bit silly, but like some of the stuff that happens in that film, it's just like,
The
what?
basic is that the one where it's like that kid kind of goes into like a wealthy family and starts to like
Yeah,
okay, yeah, yeah.
exact. So yeah, essentially. So it's Barry Keoghan is an Irish actor doing the worst Liverpool accent you'll ever hear in your life. Is basically this kind of like poor college kid who gets into Oxford and he starts hanging out with this rich kid. And the rich kid takes him back to his family's estate to spend the summer, and it's just
Mm,
about what goes on during that summer period.
shenanigans.
Um, shenanigans ensue. It's a wild watch. Some of the stuff that happens in that film, me and Neve were just like, no, it's not like gory or anything. It's not like a horror film by any means. It's just the wildest shit you'll ever see in a film. It goes on. Bit of an internet phenomena. So yeah, I watched Saltburn. I enjoyed it for the most part. It's a beautiful film, stunning, gorgeous, gorgeous film. Um, some of the story stuff, especially towards the end, are verge on silly.
Hmm.
Only other film I watched was just before Christmas was Mean Streets.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was good. I didn't love it. It's a bit messy.
Hmm.
I
Well, that
didn't
director's
love it.
probably going nowhere.
Yeah, Martin who? Um, yeah, Mean Streets was fine. In terms of actual pickups then that I got over the Christmas period, so obviously we're big Radiance film fans here, as everyone knows. It's a odd episode when they don't get mentioned at some point. So I got the December releases for Radiance films, which was this World Noir
Hmm.
Volume 1, which is
Hmm.
crucial. Volume 1, so Volume 2 will probably be coming out in this year. Looks like a cool set. I've never heard of any of the films as per Radiance films. I've never heard of any of these,
Right.
but I'm sure they're good. And then this other film is called Elegant Beast, which is by a filmmaker called Yutsuo Kawashima, who also I'd never heard of. But the screenplay, which I've just realized now, is by Kaneto Shindo, who made Onibaba, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, Onibaba and Kuroneko. So that's cool. I didn't realize that when I bought it. So that's a nice surprise for me. Um, my wife was very disappointed because I told her that I had a new special edition of Twilight arriving during, we were out for the day, and I said, I need to get home. The postman is arriving. It's a special edition of Twilight. And she was really excited. She wasn't excited when it was a Hungarian film by the same name. From second run. Apparently, this film is very influential on our friend who made Set and Tango, whose name I have.
Oh, Bellatar.
Bellatar. Yes, apparently a very influential film for
Oh,
him,
interesting.
which makes sense with it being Hungarian. Um, Mawu Films released their second release, Black God, White Devil. So I've been meaning to watch this for a long time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. Um, I'm going to guess the Criterion are going to put it out this year. I have a feeling they're going to do another one of those world cinema box sets. Um, Maybe it could get included in there. Maybe it'll get its own release. I'm not too sure. I have no evidence to back this up, but I have a feeling Criterion are going to put out a release for it. I think Janus have the rights for it at the moment in
Yeah,
terms of
that's
its
right.
theater re-release. So that's basically that's what I'm basing it on. And then two other things I got, which were presents. So the other stuff I bought myself, these were actual presents gifted to me. One is the BFI release of Targets by Peter Bogdanovich. I know that
Nice.
Criterion did their own release for this last year as well, but it's obviously easier for me to get the Region B release. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. I've been wanting to see it for a long time. This BFI release went through a bit of issues, I think, with something anyway, because it was announced and then it like disappeared off their website and disappeared from everywhere, and nobody knew what happened to it, and then it just magically reappeared everywhere like 6 months later. So I'm wanting to see it for a long time, so I'm glad to finally have that. And then last but not least, I got the 4K special box set of Touch of Evil from Eureka,
Okay.
which look, this is just gorgeous. Look how nice that is.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if this made it into the recording when we were talking about this when I was recommending Touch of Evil to you recently. I don't
Yeah,
know if it
we
made it
didn't
into
talk
the
about the
recording.
release specifically.
Oh yeah, we definitely didn't talk about the release. But Touch of Evil is so good. Touch of Evil might be better than Citizen Kane. It might be better than
Amazing.
Citizen Kane. It's so
Amazing.
good. So I'm really looking forward to rewatching. I've already seen it twice. I'm definitely gonna be obviously watching it again on the 4K this time. Great, great, great film. Yeah, those are my hiccups uh, for the last little while anyway.
You've been a busy bee.
Very. You've been
Uh,
busier though. I saw your boxes. You've been busier.
before I get into pickups, I would like to dedicate this episode to Vancouver because I spent a week there. My parents and then in-laws worked in tandem to take my son for about 10 days. And my wife got to stay home and dance, which she likes to do, and just kind of be with friends. And I went to Vancouver on a boys' trip, which I've been married for 16 years, and it was the first boys' trip. So it was quite fun. And I would just, if anybody's ever thought about going to Vancouver, I would say it's worth it. Like the hiking is probably like equal to what I imagine New Zealand is. Like it's amazing. Um, there's like within 15 minutes drive from downtown, there's an actual rainforest that's like misty and extremely like verdant, and everything is like lush and green, and there's moss everywhere. It's like you're in a some kind of a magic like fairy forest. It's intense. And the hikes are all like moderate, so they're not easy hikes. But they're not impossible. They do have hard hikes. There's the one I was reading in one that's they had like built a chain into, and you had to like climb up the chain with your legs at one point to get up the trail. So we didn't do that one. Um, but yeah, Vancouver. And then after all of that hiking, because it's only like we did a 4 mile one and a 7 mile one, and then another day we were just like walking around the city and walked about 9 miles. But because of all that, you get to feel good about eating, and it's like a fantastic foodie city too, especially if you like Asian food. I had some amazing dumplings and just like incredible, one of the best pho, like Vietnamese pho I've ever had, and just really, anyways, amazing stuff. So pro Vancouver right now. This episode's brought to you by the city of Vancouver. Um, um, and as far as pickups, I did get a lot, so I'm not going to go through it all. I'm quite embarrassed to say how much I got for Christmas. Part of it was the Severin Black Friday sale and the which was nine titles. Um, this one I'm just excited because I always want to promote Arbalest. So life is cheap, but toilet paper is expensive. Um, it's their
Oh, beautiful
new,
box.
yeah, it's their, they always do these envelopes.
Hmm.
So this is their new envelope release, and it's they always give a little bit of stuff. I'll do a 5 second unboxing. So this is the new Wang Wang movie. So anyways, that's the look. And then I don't know if you are familiar, but in Chinese New Year's they always give like red envelopes with money in it. So they put that little nice touch in there. But yeah, Arbalest with I've heard only amazing things about this movie, and the release is equally amazing. Uh I know I've said this 10 times now, but the fact that I just like goes to a paper merchant, I don't know, whatever, printer, and spends hours just, wringing his hands over like the theme of the movie and like what grade paper to use and thickness and color and texture, and then the design, just amazing. So, let's go Arbalest. The other thing, there's Vinegar Syndrome is doing some wild stuff with packaging, so I just kind of want to call this out. They have developed all this new innovative packaging styles. So the Prophecy set that they put out, it's the first three Prophecy movies, and it opens like this. So it opens like at a diagonal, which is cool. This is the second one they've done this with. There was, I'm trying to remember the movie now. I think it was the Mario Bava movie that they put out, or excuse me, the Lombardo Bava movie they put out. So Prophecy opens up like this, and then inside is this set which pulls out, and that's how they have the discs. They've also, they were the early pioneers of this metallic clasp on a cardboard box. So this Daryl that came out, they have this sort of like metallic clasp that just clasp that just opens up, and then inside they have, the booklet and the movie and all the stuff in there. They've done, let's see, what's the number of this one now? Seven. So they've done seven of these in their VSU line. Uh, and the final innovative thing they did for their 10-year reunion, they did this massive 10 box set. And this one's not the last picture show, but it's the Lost Picture Show. And it's just underground sort of either SOV or just like independent films that they all love. And so they put them together in a box set. And I thought the format of this was interesting. So there's no slip. It just is sort of this box. And it has a magnet that opens up that way. And then
That is nice.
inside it opens up like that. And then if you can see in each side there, it opens up into there's five over here on the left side and five on the right side. So they're always pushing the envelope with packaging. And it's cool because they always sell out, so they get to play. a little bit.
Yeah. That's really, really nice packaging. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's amazing what they're doing, right? I mean, this is the era where physical media is supposed to be dead,
Mm.
and they're doing all this. And then even for the release of the Untold Story 2, which for YouTube is, excuse the scary face, this is a Cat 3 movie that's pretty vicious. And but for their VSA line, which is Vinegar Syndrome Archive line, they pioneered this VHS style slip in the bottom. And they are up to 30, 40 releases in that line. That's crazy. Um, so anyways, yeah, very, very excited for also the content that Vinegar Syndrome puts out. This is my style of movies, but it's just cool to see them playing so much with the format, and they remind me a lot of Anchor Bay, which I started collecting around 2001 and have been collecting like clockwork. To give some clues about what's coming up from the director series there. Um, and then the last thing I'll mention by name, although I'm staring at a box of dozens, I don't know, of things. But the last thing I'll mention by name is I got the first two Raro video titles out. It was very kind of a surreal feeling for me when Radiance announced that Raro was going to be a partner label because I've been collecting Raro in the US for many years. And their releases are always bare bones, and even when they do have special features, I would say they're like mediocre releases, but they are like lesser known films from directors we know, or really interesting films from directors we haven't heard of. And so they have kind of a weird niche in Italian cinema. Um, but I'm excited they're getting some love, and I hope that continues with Radiance. As far as what I've seen, you were talking about internet phenom of Saltburn. I watched a movie about internet phenomena on a plane called
Okay.
Dumb Money. Have you ever seen
Okay.
that?
No, it sounds familiar though.
So yeah, I'm sure you remember it's weird to see a movie that's like a biopic of something that just happened. So it's a
Mm.
movie about the whole like
Oh,
thing with
the
GameStop.
GameStop thing.
Mm.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, I
yeah.
knew I'd heard of it. Yeah.
And I'm down on biopics. Like it's one of the reasons I don't like Titanic, which is I know controversial and they live by film, but um it was just a straight biopic. So like the story is amazing. It's such a wild story. So I was entertained, but like they didn't really do anything inventive. They just like told the story. Um, so I think for people that somehow missed it, it's cool. I would say watch it because it's unreal to think what happened in that time. Um,
My one of my friends from work bought his house through selling stocks, buying and selling
wow,
them.
that's
So
wild. I mean,
yeah.
it was up you if you sold at the high, which most people did not, but if you sold at the high, you would get 500x on what you put in,
Yeah.
which is nuts.
He took a big gamble. He literally put his savings on this. He was in it from like just before it popped, like before it became news that this was happening. He like put his savings in this and bought his house.
That's crazy.
After it all, insane,
That's
insane.
crazy. And the movie, to be fair, it does a good job of capturing the excitement around it. So it does its job. It's good. It's entertaining. And everybody likes this guy, Dano. What's his name? Paul Dano?
Oh yeah, Paul Dano. He's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody like is obsessed with Paul Dano. So I guess if you're a Paul Dano stan, then you'll like it too. But yeah, it's a straight biopic. So I was like, okay. I mean, I remember the story, so I was like, and it just happened. So I was like, okay, let's go.
Yeah, some biopics you wonder why they're biopics. Like just make a documentary. You don't really
No,
need it
totally.
to be, a biopic.
That's the weird thing. I always feel guilty talking about how I don't like biopics because I love documentaries. So
Yeah.
like I would have rather just seen like anyways. The only thing else that did we talk about Fear of a Black Hat? I don't remember if we did.
No, not on the
But
podcast anyway. This was after our last episode.
yeah. Okay. So I finally saw Cocaine Bear, which
Okay.
is great. It's fun, it's entertaining. But I would say what's the other one? I finally saw The Flash,
Okay.
which
Haven't seen either of
I
those. Cocaine
do
Bear or
kind of
Flash.
get why people like The Flash. Like they tried some stuff at least. Like I don't think it's great, but like it's good. I think the risks they took were good. But the one I would recommend, other than Otsu, because I saw Tokyo Story and An Autumn Afternoon in prep for what we're going to talk about today, just to
Mhm.
get a broader sense of him. So in addition to those, I saw Fear of a Black Hat, which for anybody who has seen This Is Spinal Tap, you have to see Fear of a Black Hat if you liked it. It's hilarious. Um, and if you don't like laughing, then don't watch it. Um, or if for some reason you're racist, don't watch it. But yeah, hilarious movie. Like so funny. And I think there's I would say if you can watch three movies, go This Is Spinal Tap, Fear of a Black Hat, and then CB4. They're all great music parodies that came out around similar time. So
And I will add a more recent one, Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping with
great
Andy
point.
Samberg.
Please. Okay,
So,
fine.
so good.
Yeah. So four. And apparently there's a country music one that I haven't seen. Somebody mentioned.
Yeah, Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. It's frick, John C. Reilly.
Okay.
John C. Reilly
And
plays
it
a
spoofs all
country
the
music
country music
star.
stuff.
Yeah, I haven't seen it personally, but I've seen clips of it. It's basically kind of like it came out kind of around the same time as Walk the Line and stuff. So it's just kind
Okay.
of like, you know, sort of a piss take of like a country music biopic.
He like drinks too much and all the like tropes of the genre, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah, I've only seen a few clips. I've never
Oh,
actually sat
oh,
down and
okay,
watched
okay.
a film, but I've heard it's really, really funny. I need
I'm
to actually sit
sure.
down and watch it. I don't really listen to country music, so I never really was enticed to watch
Same,
it,
same,
even though it's a
same.
comedy. So yeah.
Yep. Same, same. Cool. Yeah, but that's it. I mean, I have watched a lot of Otsu in prep for this. I would
Hmm.
say prior to this month, I had only seen Ohio or Good Morning.
That's what I was going to ask. Had you seen? As I know, I was certain that we'd seen Good Morning with the film club.
Hmm.
So that
Hmm.
that is true. Yeah, I'd seen Good Morning. I'd seen Tokyo Story many years ago. And I don't think I'd seen, well, I saw Late Spring already. I did rewatch Late Spring,
Hmm.
but I had already seen Late Spring. Then the next two were completely new to me. Hadn't
Okay,
seen those before. So yeah, we can get into Otsu now if you want.
let's go.
Cool. Uh, you want to go in chronological?
Sure. Yeah. Would you like me to do like a background of why I chose him and intro and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah. Work away, man.
Um,
That sounds good.
all right. So we we tend to like movies here and They Live by Film. I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah,
It's something the three of us share. Uh, and I like we all like movies from different eras and countries and whatever, unless they're from Australia, in which case Adam is a raging bigot.
correct.
Um, and I was just thinking about we had a good run of like more popular sort of Western filmmakers, and we did Coen Brothers, and we did the Scream stuff, and we did just a bunch of films that were, I would say, very easy to watch and like very palatable and uh, more on the populist end of things, like did well box office wise, and um, I there the most, if not the most, one of the most successful populist filmmakers in Japan is a name that has kind of been like forced into art house circles now as he's gotten older, which is interesting. And his name is Yasujiro Ozu. And I obviously he's like a well-known person and is all over the They Shoot Pictures list, which we'll get into here in a bit. But I was intrigued because when we saw Good Morning, there was like fart jokes in it,
Yeah,
and like
it's
a
a
lot
funny
of
film.
them,
Yeah,
right?
it's like the main point of the film is fart jokes.
Yeah. So I was like, huh, like this is an interesting guy to kind of like pay attention to. And so I wanted to go into Otsu, reading into his character, super interesting guy. Like a lot of people. So we're going to talk about this more as we go through the episode. But up until he died, he lived with his mom. He never married, and was kicked out of military school or excuse me, a boarding school when he was younger because he wrote a love letter to another boy. So there's this kind of speculation that he was gay, and But he never, there's not a lot of documentation about it or anything, but the combination of sort of never marrying despite being attractive and financially successful and like by all means sort of like a good match, and choosing to live with his mom throughout his life, and then this letter to to another boy in school has kind of led to speculation that he was probably gay, which is a super interesting lens to watch his films through, which we'll
Mhm.
get into here in just a moment. I would say there's zero hint of that, um,
No,
but
I did not know any of that information before you told me it, and I would
and
never
you
have guessed it.
right from watching the movies, there's no like
Yeah.
clues, right? Um, but I do think it's an interesting lens to kind of view the films through, especially the fact that he never married and lived with his mom. Certainly is a theme,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
which we'll get into. I want to be careful on this episode because I have a lot of respect for. There's some things we'll talk about, like the way he uses depth in his shots is quite remarkable. I think the way he frames and stages. I think there is humor in his stories. Um, there's a bunch of stuff we'll get into. And I also am not quite sure why he's so famous. I find his movies to be very interesting, and he essentially made the same movie like 12 times. And so the best thing that I can wrap my head around is that he was called the Jane Austen of Japan.
Hmm.
And that helped like wrap my mind a little bit around what to do going in, because Jane Austen told a similar story through like different lens, right? And different characters, but like it was all about like culture and sort of society and like the interaction between
Class.
romantic things in class and all this stuff, right? And so it's probably not fair to him to say like the Jane Austen of Japan, because I think what he did was unique and his own, and like shouldn't just be compared to Jane Austen, but that did help frame it for me a little bit, and help me appreciate it a little bit. And anyways, well, there's a lot more we'll get into, but that was the background of why I chose Otsu and a little bit of kind of interesting information about him. And I think it's worth noting that he's one of these directors where his films were critically successful, which we'll get into as we go through one by one, but also extremely commercially successful for him. So he was able to manage both, and made a lot of money for the studios that he worked with. So um, yeah, I think we could jump in. So
Yep.
if we go chronologically, we would do late spring first, right?
Hmm. Correct.
Okay. Um, so this is interesting. So late spring. So Tokyo Story is the fourth best movie of all time according to They Shoot Pictures,
Hmm.
which I would debate that, but that's okay. Not my it's a list by consensus. This late spring is supposed to be the 55th best movie of all time, and in fact jumped up 30 spots this year, which is saying something. Because to be in the top 100 already and then to jump up 30 spots is great. However, it's sort of confusing because the year before that it was 26. So it went from 26 to 81 to now 55. So it's like people
Okay.
don't know what to think about late spring.
Flip-flopping on it. Yeah.
Yeah. But what did you think, Adam, of late spring?
So, as I said, this is my second time watching Late Spring. I did rewatch it because it's been a while since I saw it originally.
Mhm.
I put Late Spring in the same category as The Rules of the Game, in that it's probably the best made film that I don't really actually like all that much.
Yeah.
Um, it's a phenomenal film in purely from a technical filmmaking standpoint. As you mentioned, his Otu's shot composition is next to none.
Yeah.
Especially those kind of unique low angle
Yeah.
sort of looking up. Nobody shoots films like that. Nobody ever sort of did. Nobody has since, except for maybe like copycats, like Koreeda or something like that. But
Hmm.
nobody kind of shoots films like Otsu did. Every every shot feels like a painting. It's so meticulously planned with the
Yeah, it's true.
blocking and the framing, and as you said, the depth. And you can see a lot of even like more so in Good Morning, and later on we talk about early early
Summer,
autumn, late autumn,
late autumn.
whatever,
Hmm.
late autumn.
Hmm.
almost kind of like proto Wes Anderson-esque in terms of
Yeah,
its
that's true.
symmetry and stuff like that. So very, very well composed films. I think Late Spring in particular, out of the three we're going to talk about, is the best looking one in my opinion. There's this one shot, like a long shot. We see a train come into a station. Incredible. Really, really,
Mm,
really, really great film. I think the script is immaculate. Um, there's something. This will be something I talk about the next two films. Um, uh, in unsimilar light, unfortunately, a dissimilar light, unfortunately. But I think the script in Late Spring is immaculate. Every scene is there to support the themes and to support the plot and
mm,
character development. There's no fat at all. It's all there for a reason.
mm,
So the script is fantastic. The film looks incredible. The direction is top notch. The performances are very good. Chishu Ryu and Setsuka Hara are obviously fantastic. Um, but I don't like it. It's it doesn't. I can't warm up to it, and I think a little bit is because of it's hard for me to it's hard for me to relate. Well, maybe relate's the wrong word, but it's hard for me to feel sort of emotionally attached to what's
mm,
going on
mm.
because and this is probably why Otsu is so popular in Japan because it's made for people in Japan in the
Totally.
1950s. This is
Totally.
who it's made for. It's the same issue I have with rules of the game. It's made for a
Mm,
very specific group of people in a very specific time. And it's very hard to relate to that when you're not in Japan in the late 40s, early 50s, especially there's so much stuff that just feels weird in a modern context. This idea of arranged marriages and stuff like that. It feels weird in a modern context, and it's hard for me to take my
mm,
2024 eyes off that. Um, like the sort of main track, again, we always talk about spoilers here, so I don't think you can really spoil these types of films
I don't
anyway,
know
to
if,
be
yeah, I don't think
honest.
so.
Yeah, but
Mm,
this sort of final sort of the final act of the film is meant to be seen as this great emotional sacrifice that the father character makes. But when
mm,
you look at it, it's like, what's his sacrifice? He's shipped his daughter off to an arranged marriage, and now he has to cook his own food and clean his own house. Is that really, am I supposed to feel bad for this guy?
mm, mhm,
But apparently, yes, that's the thing. This is apparently the big sort of emotional crutch of the
mhm,
film.
mhm,
So yeah, it's going to be a common theme when we talk about these three films. I find it really hard to relate to what's going on and actually have the emotional resonance. But at least with Late Spring, compared to the next two films, it's an immaculate movie. Purely from a filmmaking standpoint,
mhm.
if you're interested in becoming a filmmaker and learning film form and film style, it's an incredibly important movie. But I would not be choosing this for entertainment purposes, is the best way I can put it.
There's a good friend who, funny enough for you, Adam, lives in Australia. I've started to talk about film a lot with, and I was telling her I feel a little bit bad because we're going to be shitting on one of the all-time classic directors here. Uh, I think I want to focus on what Ozu does well because I understand why he's so famous and I understand why he's up there in the,
Yeah,
upper echelon
absolutely.
of directors. But man, his films are dry, dry,
Very
dry,
dry.
dry, dry.
Very.
Like it's just it is interesting to watch for me from like a if I had unlimited money and I could do anything, I might be a cultural anthropologist. Like that might be one of the areas that I go into. I'm fascinated with culture and like I think what I understand about Japanese culture from his movies, if I could make a statement like this, but at least from how I interpret it, is it's like the peak of collectivism versus individualism, right?
Mm,
Like all of his movies are about like three old men, mostly, some women, but like sitting around deciding the fate of like somebody's daughter, trying to connect her, right? Like trying to see who's like a good match.
yeah.
And nobody really questions if they have good judgment or not. Like it's just like, and they keep saying things like, well, do you like the guy? And then the daughter would say, I think so, yes. And It's like, well, then you marry him, right? It's just like a, like there's a completely different view on.
And often the daughter has not yet met the guy. It's like this is his job and this is what he looks like. Do you like him?
True.
Yeah, okay. You know, so
That's true. Um, yeah, and so like I don't know what to think about that, right? That's very opposite of everything I kind of view about romance and whatever. But uh, I was fascinated, excuse me, but I was fascinated by the way they did it because it was just everyone was okay with this. Like it was clear
mm,
that this was the way that you did it, right?
yeah,
I was interested in how casual they were with drinking, like big drinking culture, obviously.
yeah.
I was fascinated by the houses. So he never showed the outside of the house, if I remember right, in Late Spring or
Not
maybe
that I
any of the
recall.
movies.
Not that I recall seeing any outside of houses.
I think Good Morning they might have shown like the kids leaving the house once or
They
something.
did, yeah. And Good Morning they do because it's kind of like it's kind of set amongst people running between houses and
Okay.
things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely in Good Morning they do, and
But
I'm pretty sure in Tokyo Story as well, but definitely not in
okay.
these three films as far as I
Yeah, they don't,
remember.
right? So you see like the inside of the house. It's like set up at a particular angle where sometimes you can see two rooms at once. Sometimes he focuses on a
Mhm.
room. Um, but that whole like bamboo style of house is also fascinating to me. Like that's
Yeah,
a these were like successful people in the stories, like successful businessmen and their families, and the houses were so simple. Um, just interesting. I don't know, just again, like just like a cultural thing, like I was interested in that to an extent. Um, and like the way that it was just assumed that the daughter in this case, um, although I think the son in one of the movies as well, but the daughter was just going to stay home and take care of the family until they, were married off.
yeah,
Interesting, right? Again, just things that are like different.
yeah.
Um, so I would say, but when I watched Late Spring, I was okay. I was still kind of in it, and it's a well-made movie. Um, by the time it ended, I was a little bit like, oh dear, there's gonna be like three of these. And I was looking at the description and I was like, okay, all right, get your mind ready. Like, and this is good. Um, and they're just so similar. But as we go through them, I do want to say like I'll add a little bit more on that. It was easier to go through them than I thought. And I think they actually, in a weird way, work better as like a series as opposed to one-off.
They do develop, yeah. The
Yeah.
kind of the sort of central idea of what's accepted by society does actually develop
Mm,
as the three films go by. So even though they're very similar, it's about the daughter trying to get married, or
right.
people trying to get the daughter married
Hmm.
off. There is actually subtle differences between how this all works as each film goes by. It kind
Yeah.
of becomes more modern, I guess. And this is the thing with Otsu films in general, is they're essentially a time capsule.
Mm,
It's like he's just giving you a window into what Japan is like
yeah.
at this time.
That's
So
great.
as society develops, he developed along with it, and he changed, what the norm was then. It's really interesting in that regard, and his films are certainly dry, especially when we talk about the next one. Incredibly dry films, but as you said, if you're into, anthropology or cultures or history, or, just want to watch a film that is essentially a time capsule of an exact moment in time, that's not like a documentary, then like Otsu films are exactly that. He
Yeah.
will just show you what is going on. He'll give you a very simple story to follow. There's no excessive themes. You don't need to peel away a bunch of layers. He's not an intellectual filmmaker in the same way as someone like Bergman
Right.
or, Godard or Kubrick or one of those, where there's layers
Hmm.
to peel away. There's no layers to peel away. It's all very much out here in front of you. The
Yeah.
only thing we could really kind of say, I don't know if you're aware of this, or if you're aware of the vase phenomenon with Late Spring. We can talk about that in a moment. But for the most part, there's not a bunch of layers to peel away here. It's a very simple story, and it's a time capsule into what general sort of family life was like in Japan, and
Yeah.
in whatever year this film was coming out.
Yeah. Um, That's right. The, one of the themes that's in Late Spring that I thought was interesting was this idea that the dad, who was typically played by Chisu,
Yeah.
had this like responsibility to marry off his daughter.
Hmm.
And the burden of her being single versus married was sort of on him. And that's, certainly not the only culture that has arranged marriages, but
No.
um, I hadn't seen it quite that way before, where it was, a lot of times it was, trying to remember if this is right. Most, a lot of the times it was just the dad and the daughter, right? The mom had died or something had happened, right? To them.
In late spring, it's just the dad and the daughter. The mother, I
Yeah.
don't think is mentioned. In late autumn, it's the mother
The
and the
mother and the daughter.
daughter.
That's right.
But in early summer, both parents are there.
Okay. Okay. That's right. Yeah, late spring, it's just the dad. And then in an autumn afternoon, which is the other one that I had seen, which is very similar to late spring in terms of kind of tone and everything, except autumn afternoon is like a straight comedy.
Okay.
So I would recommend if you're gonna start with Otsu, if you want more of like the drama side, probably start with Tokyo Story. And I
Mhm.
think if you want more of a lighter side, probably start with Autumn Afternoon because it's quite funny. Like it's a lot of the same beats with the older men sitting around drinking and talking, but like they're making fun of each other, even like kind of pranking each other at times and stuff. So it's very silly and funny. Great movie to watch. Very, very enjoyable actually. So when you asked me how I was doing with Otsu, I was having a great time because I had seen Tokyo Story and then Autumn Afternoon and then Late Spring, which was okay. Like I enjoyed it. Um, but that fatigue did start to set in because I was like Autumn Afternoon is so similar to Late Spring, and then I read the description for the next two and I was like, oh boy.
It's
Um,
more of this.
yeah. I just have never quite seen anything like it before where this director who has such a long career made the same movie so many times. It's interesting.
Yeah, the closest thing I can really think of comparative wise would have been Eric Romer, where he made the
Oh,
Moral
true.
Tales,
True.
where it's just
Yeah.
kind of like the same kind of story over, I think like six Moral Tales? Just get
Yeah.
yeah, the sort of same skeleton of a story, kind of over and over again. And I guess, if you wanted to be that guy, you could probably accuse someone like maybe Hitchcock or Fritz Lang, kind of making the same kind of movie over and over again, just kind of changing the plot
That's a good
semantics a little
point,
bit.
right?
But
Like
but
common every man gets into a crazy situation kind of thing
yeah,
for sure.
exactly. You
Uh-huh.
think of like 39 Steps, North by
Yeah,
Northwest, Rear
yeah, yeah.
Window. It's all the same
Hmm.
thing, really,
True.
But yeah, it's definitely it's a whole other kettle of fish when it comes to Otsu. He is, and like Otsu even remade his own films a good few times.
That's right.
Like Good Morning is a remake of an early film, a silent film he did because called I Was Born, but um, he remade the one, is it something like tea over rice or something like that? The flavor of green tea over rice, I think it's something like that. He made that one twice, both in silent and in sound. He made Floating Weeds twice, both silent
Mm,
and in sound. So he even remade
mm,
once sound and color came in, he started even remaking his older
mm,
silent films. So uh he definitely has a niche.
mm.
That's the best way to put it. He certainly has a niche. And to be fair, if you're going to have a niche, be the master of your niche, and he is.
Yeah, yeah,
So
sure.
like he is a genre in himself.
Right. True.
Nobody made films the way he did because you know nobody can put it all together in the same way. We talk about we many years ago in the film club we watched a film by Koreeda called Still Walking,
Hmm.
which I really like. I really like that film. But I remember we didn't even talk about it on the podcast as you and Zach thought it was boring as hell. I didn't like it at all. But that is essentially a modern Otsu film,
Yeah. I was thinking about that. I
stylistically.
wanted to watch it again now.
I really like it. But
Mm,
I'd already seen Tokyo Story. I don't think I'd seen Late Spring by the
mm.
time I had watched Still Walking. But I definitely seen Tokyo Story. So I was aware of where he was getting his influence from. So maybe that's why I enjoyed it a little bit more. But um yeah, in regards to Otsu and Late Spring and stuff like that, he has his niche and he's very good at it. But it's just one of those things where, and this is with a lot of films, especially kind of maybe ones that are away from the roller coaster ride movies.
Hmm.
Um, you do have to be in the right mindset
Yeah,
when you're
I
sitting
think
down
so.
to watch it. You know, if you
Yeah.
sit down, if you've just watched, I don't know, freaking Spider-Man or something, and you're gonna put on Late Spring next, it's an altogether different vibe. Um,
Yeah.
you know, a different cinematic experience altogether, which I don't think is a bad thing. You know, it's great to have variety and stuff like that. But
Just get your
maybe
head
watching
right for it.
three, maybe watching three Otsu films in a row this week wasn't the best call.
It was a
Uh,
lot.
yeah. Um, One thing I mentioned with Late Spring, earlier, there's obviously, like I said, with Otsu films, there's not a lot of peeling away and stuff that you need to do. A lot of the stuff is on, you know, he wears his themes on his sleeve. A lot of
Right.
it's very obvious through dialogue. Um, like one of the things I just before I talk about the actual thing I want to talk about, one of the things I thought was cool in Late Spring was that they set it up very early that the father is very incompetent in how general household stuff. So there's that
Mm.
scene where Noriko is visited by one of her friends and they're sitting down and the father comes and brings them tea and he forgot the milk and he forgot the sugar and he forgot all the basic stuff that you need
Mm-hmm.
for tea.
Hmm.
So it's set up very, very early that the father doesn't really know how to do general household things, which looking back now, it's you know, you're just you I personally have no sympathy for him because, you know, this is very basic stuff. But I suppose in those days it was kind of just expected that the man just did he went out and did the work and then he came home and
Mm.
the wife and the daughter and whatever did the menial housework
Yeah,
stuff.
I think
That is
so.
just that is a product of its time. Agree with it or don't agree with it. It is what it is. It's a product of its
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
But that's what I kind of meant earlier when I said everything in this film is kind of deliberate in setting up, you know, what happens later.
True.
But there's one moment in the film that is it's very inconsequential. And you might not even remember it happened, but it's like one of the most debated things in all of Oates' films. There have been
Okay.
dozens and dozens of essays written about this one little sequence.
Okay.
And it's later in the film when Noriko and her dad are on a trip to Kyoto and they're having a conversation, kind of, they're sort of lying next to each other in this room, having a conversation and it seems like Noriko's finally gonna, you know, just go ahead with the marriage and her dad's
Hmm.
okay
Hmm.
with it. And she's sort of smiling. And then Otsu switches to just looking at a vase
Oh,
and he
okay.
just lingers at a vase for like 7 seconds and then he comes back and Noriko suddenly sort of looks a bit sad and dejected. And that one sequence is like 15 seconds long. There has been books, there has been essays, there
Ah,
has been
okay, okay.
this is what does Otsu mean? Why did he switch to the vase? What does the
Okay.
vase mean? That's essentially what the
Mm,
scholars want to know. What does the vase mean? Why did
okay.
Otsu switch to a vase and then back to Noriko and now her emotions have flipped?
Okay.
So I don't have an answer because I thought I wasn't going and investigating what the meaning behind this phase was. But if you did want to you know, just go down the rabbit hole of scholars picking one little thing to really kind of nitpick on, I think the Otsu vase is like the best example of a time where scholars have perhaps gone a little bit overboard with trying to find meaning. If Zach
It's
was here, he
hilarious.
would say something that sometimes the curtains are just blue.
Exactly. I was thinking about that, yeah.
So yeah.
Huh, interesting. Yeah, I don't remember it to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I only kept an eye out for it because when I had originally watched Late Spring and I ended up on the Wikipedia page like I normally do, there's a whole
Mm,
section about this vase.
the base.
So I was like, right, I'm gonna keep an eye out for this vase and see what's the big deal about it. And I nearly missed it. I was like, oh wait, no, there's a vase. And then I went back to Noriko. I was like, oh okay, yeah, that's the vase.
Interesting.
Okay.
If I watch the movie again, I'll take an eye out for. I would actually be interested in watching this with the commentary. If the
Hmm.
comment, I need to figure out who did it. If the commentary was done by like a Japanese historian, I think that could be interesting.
If I
Uh,
had to guess, it's probably that English guy who
yeah, I was thinking about
does
that. Yeah, Tony Ryan's or whatever.
Tony Raines, isn't
Or
it? Something like
Rains.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
If
was
I
wondering
had
about
to guess, it was
that.
probably him. I'm just gonna pop onto the Criterion channel very briefly just to
Just while
see.
you do so,
Yeah.
so this was the beginning of something called the Noriko trilogy.
Yes.
Um, which early summer, which we'll talk about, and then Tokyo Story was the finale there. Um, and I think that maybe we'll talk about this more. We can switch to early summer here shortly, since we're
Mhm.
going to be talking about it anyways. I was a little confused at first why he focused so much on seasons, because the seasons were never mentioned. Like I don't think spring was ever mentioned in the movie itself.
No.
But seeing them all so close together, and then seeing an autumn afternoon as well, and like, and then we're going to talk about not the Noriko trilogy, but something called Late Autumn. Um, I kind of get it. I don't think it's actually that confusing why he goes by seasons. I think he's just in his mind he's depicting these different seasons of life, and um,
Yeah,
maybe
like late spring, I think is the most obvious one. Noriko
yeah,
is considered sort of a late bloomer in terms of
yeah,
getting married. I
yeah.
don't really get the other ones so much. The late spring one is the obvious one for me. I just assumed he just liked the sound of naming them after seasons after doing late spring. That was my
We,
assumption.
I have a theory for early summer, and then I think late autumn to me makes sense. Early summer was
Okay.
the one that, because autumn is like kind of it's like nearing the end, right? You're like kind of aging and like getting towards winter at
Yeah.
the end, and I everyone's a little bit older in that. And anyways, I kind of early summer was the one I had to think the most about. But that might be a good transition. I don't have too much else to say about late spring. It's a
No.
well-made movie, like you said, but I didn't get into it.
No. The commentary is actually not done by who we thought. It's by a guy called Richard Pena, who is program director of the Film Society of Lincoln Center and an associate professor at Columbia University. This was recorded 20 years ago. It was recorded in 2004, so I don't know if there's a newer commentary. Definitely not on the Criterion channel anyway. That's the one that's on the Criterion channel.
We
But
need Sam Deegan to do a commentary or something. She's
as
like,
there,
she knows everything about everything.
yeah, I'm curious to know because I know that BFI released pretty much all the Otsu films in Region B. So I'm a little bit curious to see if they have a different one on the BFI release. I'm just gonna just quickly check as it's usually quite easy to find. No, it doesn't look as though it has any commentary at all on the BFI release.
Mm.
So there goes that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't, I would almost say like if you're going to do a critical deep dive into late spring, that probably doesn't need a 2 hour commentary.
No,
But if you're going to do like the context of Japan and the war and like all, I think there could be an interesting angle there. Um, maybe we
to be
can.
fair, I don't even like commentaries anyway. The one time I tried to watch a commentary was when we did our Giallo special.
Mm,
And I went to go watch the commentary of Deep Red as I'd already seen Deep Red
mm,
twice. And I was like, hey,
mm.
let me watch the commentary. And then 5 minutes in, I was like, I wish this dude would shut the fuck up and let me watch the movie. So that's when I realized commentaries weren't for me. So
I like it. It's funny. Yeah, so I mean, I feel like that's a pretty good segue into early summer, anyways. I did want to quickly mention, so we mentioned the movie Autumn Afternoon. So if you think about Otsu sort of beloved by critics, Tokyo Story is the considered the fourth best movie of all time when they shoot pictures.
yeah, that's his big
Late
one.
Sp It's his big masterpiece, right? Late Spring is considered the 55th best movie. Autumn Afternoon, which is his last picture, which is very funny as I was talking about, is 226 on this list.
Okay.
And then early summer is 502.
Wow.
And so, we're not even getting into like floating weeds today, which is 995. Um, so I mean, he's just all over this list. Like he's a very beloved director. If I were to see any one of his movies next, there's a movie he made coming right out of the war. It was made in 1947. It's called Record of a Tenement Gentleman. And that's
Yeah.
probably the one I'd be most interested to see next because apparently it's got a little bit of more of a bite to it. And I don't think it's the same story. Um, so a couple of reasons there to be into it. But that one's 2759. So I guess critics hate it in comparison. Okay, so but anyways, we're talking about early summer now. So um this is where we might have the most contentious point in the episode. I This was my favorite one of the three that we watched.
Wow.
Um
Wow.
Specifically because I think it had some humor in it, and um, I found it to be a little bit more engaging. And there's a scene we'll talk about as we get through this in the end, where I think it was one of the best representations of what I'm kind of talking about, where I think we have this fascinating glimpse into like the culture of the way that they like give up the daughter. Uh,
Hmm.
um, uh, okay, so like maybe quickly just get into the plot. 1949, late spring comes out. 2 years later, 1951, early summer comes out. The exact same story. She does have both parents in this story. It's Noriko again, although it's not the same Noriko, but it's a character named Noriko, played by the same actor, um, Setsuko Hara. And the dad is also Chishurio here, so it's like the same kind of.
No, it's not. This is the funny thing. Chishu Ryu plays her brother because Chishu Ryu is only 14 years older than Sakura
That's right. This is the one where he
Hara.
plays her brother. That's right. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
he gets aged
Um,
up in the other films.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
yeah,
weird.
yeah. That's right. That's right. Um, which allows them to both kind of be in movies together for so long. That's right.
Yeah,
You're exactly right. I'm sorry, it's her brother here. But this is an interesting one because I think in late spring, it's the tension is around leaving the dad who's
yeah.
alone, right? And in early summer now, the tension is not about leaving so much, but it's about the fact that Setsuko Hara is going to go to poverty, um, which I don't quite understand because the guy's like a doctor or something, and he's going into like a poor village. So I think it's just maybe like it's just a different life than the city life.
Yeah, so for me, the main tension is her family had a good match that they considered was a good match, it was a good
Mhm.
family, a good life, but the dude was like 40. He was like 40-year-old guy,
Uh-huh.
and there was obviously concern that he was too old for her, but
Yeah.
the family kind of concede, well, at least he'll give her a good life, blah blah blah. Um, but she's friends with this doctor who's a similar age, but he's in a poor background and
Yeah.
lives in a poor village, so won't be a lucrative life. There, as you said, poverty gets thrown around pretty randomly.
Yeah.
Um, but and this is what I was mentioning earlier in regards to how things kind of progress from a societal point of view, film by film, because yes, Noriko has to get married and get out of the family house and start a family and blah blah blah. But at least she kind of chooses who she does that with in this
Yeah.
one. They
It's true.
try to arrange a marriage for her, but she kind of goes against that, goes against her family's wishes, and marries someone she does like. I will say with this film, I'm surprised it's your favorite. I wanted nothing more for this movie to end when I was watching it. I never fall asleep during movies, and this one nearly got me. Um, I had a real tough time with this film. There's so like the main sort of crux of this film, as I mentioned, is that Noriko is going to be potentially married off to this 40-year-old man, and she
Right.
doesn't want that. She wants to, marry this other guy.
Right.
That doesn't happen till over an hour into the movie. So like I don't even remember what happens in the first hour. It's all just like, and this is what I meant compared to late spring, which every scene serves a purpose.
Mm, mm.
Early summer, I feel is the opposite. I feel like we spend the first hour doing nothing, and then the actual plot kicks in, and the last hour is not that bad.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know. I have it's funny. I have the slightly opposite reaction in the sense that to me these films don't end soon enough. Like I wish both early summer and late autumn would have ended like 30 minutes earlier. Like I don't think either one of
mhm.
them needed to be 2 hour movies.
No,
Um this could be a tight story. This, this is like, if this was like a 65, 70-minute story, I feel like it would be perfect.
wouldn't be as bad. No, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Um but this one I like because I like the way that it plays with the relationship between the elderly folks in her life and Noriko, and the way that they can't say what they want to say. So they have to like they do this interesting thing in early summer, which they do across all of his movies, but I think it's pronounced here, where they just make it about her. I'm just
Hmm.
concerned about you. And like, are you going to be happy? Are you going to be okay? And she doesn't give them any background or any detail. She just says, I've thought about it. It's okay. I'll be okay. And like I guess that's all they're allowed to push into as parents. It's interesting. Like
Mm.
the most they can do to like convince her is to like ask the same question again. Are you sure you'll be okay? Right? And like, but the logic of the family dynamic, like the logic of the story is just that they don't make it about their needs and like their concern, like the family's gonna like lose name or lose stature or it's nothing about that. The way that they position it to her is just, are you gonna be okay?
Yeah.
And I think that was very interesting because like they even when they talk about it internally, they don't really talk about status and all of that. Like they just focus on her.
No, and in a Western film, in if it was set in a time period in kind of Western culture where marrying off was a done thing,
Hmm.
that would have been, that would have been the main kind of tension within the
Yeah.
family. You're gonna beseech the family name, you're gonna make us look bad,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, as you said, it's not really, it's they're more concerned about her actual well-being and the life she's gonna be able to lead.
I think so, but this is the thing I found kind of interesting about it is like it seemed like they were worried about themselves, but like that was the way that they had to position it, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Okay, I
Like
gotcha.
I like they because when they were talking about like, when the elderly couple was talking, who was the same elderly couple from Tokyo Story, right?
Hmm.
The grandparents or whatever. No, I guess it would have been her parents in
It
the
was
story.
her parents, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I did. Maybe this was me projecting, but I got the imp from just watching so many Western movies. So I don't know. Maybe I had a hard time believing that it was only about her, but like they made it about her, but it just seemed like there was something else going on that like they couldn't say, and like they kind of had to try to get her to do what they wanted, but like, but by making it about her, you know?
Yeah, and again, again, this is a cultural thing that I don't know enough about to really comment, but like maybe it is a thing, like once she agrees, she has to be the one to kind of back out of it. Nobody else can kind of get involved. So
Yeah,
maybe they have
that's
to
what I
kind of be
felt like,
subtle
something like
about it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was almost like in late spring, I felt like it was just about somebody finding her a match and then her going towards that match. And then in
Mhm.
this one, I feel like it was a little bit of that like tension of like the old generation, but like she had a choice. So
Mhm.
it's like a little bit like, like the influence of the West kind of like coming in a little bit, like especially after the war. We're what, 5 years removed from the war at this point.
Mhm.
I don't know that there was the same animosity toward the US. I mean, I'm sure it was still there to some extent, but like, oh, one of the things I forgot to mention about Otsu, which is interesting, is the same thing as Kurosawa, is he was raised on Italian and American movies.
Okay.
So there was, for him, it was like silent movies. It was like movies from the 1917 and stuff, when he was growing up. But like, it was still like he had this like very American kind of influence coming in, and I wouldn't say his movies are American at all, like
No.
100% Japanese movies. Um, but I do wonder if he's just more aware of like the way that people talk about this in the West, and like maybe he sees that more in Japanese culture, and so it, like comes into the story more or something. I don't know. But yeah, I start to see this transition. So I was thinking a lot about why it's called early summer. Late spring, like we said, kind of makes sense, and I think we'll get into late autumn here in a minute. That makes sense to me. But early summer, if I remember right, from like a harvest perspective, isn't that the time where you harvest? Like, isn't that the time where you, pretty sure,
Perhaps. I
like
don't know.
agriculturally, I'm pretty sure that like spring is when everything kind of blossoms and comes up, and then summer is when you like harvest, right? And then, anyways, I'm pretty sure that's right. I don't have an agricultural background, but it seems to me like this was like that time period for her, like in the family. She was like of the right age. She was blossomed. She was right. She was like ready, right? The other idea that I had was that he's such an autobiographical filmmaker. It could just simply be him, like either purposely or accidentally reflecting on his own life and just like feeling like he was in kind of like a summer phase of his life. Um, because as I read about his story, and then watch these movies, it just felt like he was kind of telling his story again and again and again in
Mm.
like different ways. And so it could just simply be about him, which he certainly wouldn't be the only director to do that.
No.
Um, it's an interesting thing, right? Like so many of these directors just basically tell their stories and like these classic films, like they're just sort of autobiographical in a way, but like the way that they tell the story is beautiful. And so like people resonate it with it universally. I was just flipping through the top five movies to see if that's true. Top five movies are Citizen Kane, that's a biopic.
Biopic, basically. Yeah, comedy and
Vertigo,
change.
which is, I'm assuming not autobiographical for Hitchcock.
Well, I don't know. Obsession with blonde women. That makes sense to me for
True.
Hitchcock. So,
Could be in there. 2001, most likely not autobiographical.
no.
Tokyo Story, which seems to be, although Tokyo Story's interesting because it's more about this like not respecting the parents and all that kind of stuff. It's
Hmm.
I'd say more focused on like a
It's basically
modern.
like a remake of Make Way for Tomorrow.
Ah, interesting. You're right. Huh, you're right. Um, and then Rules of the Game, probably not autobiographical. So I don't know. My theory doesn't really hold up. Then The Godfather, and then Eight and a Half, which is highly autobiographical. That's like
Yes,
literally about. So
it
there's
is the autobiographical one of
yeah.
that list for sure.
All right, fine. So 1 out of 10. It's not that it doesn't hold up, but it just seemed like a lot of these auteurs that we're going through, like they tend to write about what they know, which I mean, I guess makes sense anyways.
That's just art in general, really. It's easier to sort of write and create from your own kind of experiences. So
Yeah. All right. I don't know. It's weird to talk about. Like, I don't have much to say about early summer. I think I enjoyed it. There's a sense of uh, like the in all of these movies, the importance of the family
mhm.
seems to override the importance of the individual and like
Yes,
this person kind of finding romance, which I think is interesting.
romance is
Um,
just non-existent.
yeah, right,
the, the,
exactly.
the, the entire concept of romance just
Yeah, yeah.
it's all about you need to go get married so that you can settle down and have a family and
Hmm.
look after this man's house. Now you're done looking after my house, now you need to go look after some other man's house now instead. It's
Yeah,
the idea of romance doesn't seem to exist.
right. Until late autumn, a little bit, I think. It's
Yeah,
like
so
coming in, right?
we can talk, yeah, for sure, that seems to be, and this is a good it's a good segue into late autumn because we've kind of mentioned it now a couple of times that the what happens in the films and how the characters react to the circumstances does seem to change as society kind of changes with it.
Yeah.
In late spring, it's just like it's like Noriko is not really concerned with the marriage aspect. It's more about leaving her father behind that she's married, that she's worried about.
Right.
Whereas with early summer, again, there's not really a romance about it, but she does want to marry somebody. She doesn't want to be sort of forced into this marriage. She'd rather marry somebody that she knows.
Yeah,
But
right.
again, we're never given there's never sort of any scenes of romance between them or anything like that. It
Mm.
all seems very formal. So now with late autumn, um, there does seem to now be this idea of kind of westernized idea of romance, dating, and well,
Yeah,
maybe we're not going to get married. We're just seeing how things go. Yeah, I like him. He seems nice, and we'll go
right,
on dates and we'll hang out and we'll
right,
see where it goes. Which
right.
is what's what is cool. And so if we move on to late autumn, if we're happy to move away from early summer completely. If we do move on to late autumn,
Yeah.
um, I have similar feelings towards late autumn in that I uh, similar from both films. So I liked Late Autumn more than I liked Early Summer.
Yeah.
Um, it was a few things really that kind of made it a bit more enjoyable to me. The color photography is pretty beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Looks great. Some of the colors reminded me a bit of In the Mood for Love, the kind of greens and reds and
Huh.
stuff like
Okay.
that.
Interesting.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Wong Kar-wai was influenced by it in some way.
Sure.
Especially there's like this recurring shot of like an alleyway between this kind of alleyway on a street, and there's like a green sign and a red sign and stuff. Felt very Wong Kar-wai,
Hmm.
kind of proto Wong Kar-wai. So like how the film looks. That kind of how sort of society has kind of changed, in terms of how the daughter in this film, who is not played by Sasuke Hara. Sasuke Hara plays the mother in this film,
Hmm.
and it's her daughter that's trying to be married off by these three weirdos, um, who I don't know why they're sticking their nose in her business, but whatever. Um, yeah, I found this one pretty funny. I like the scenes with the three old guys. They were
Yeah.
like pretty
Yeah.
humorous.
Yeah.
They're just like three old women,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way they
Totally.
sort of talk to people and stuff. So I found it pretty funny. My main issue I had with the film was I got about an hour into it and I paused it to go for a toilet break. And I was like, wait, I'm only an hour in. There's an hour left. Where are we going? So kind of
Yeah.
similar with early summer. It definitely needs tightening up.
Yeah.
Um, like out of the three films, as I said, Late Spring is certainly the tightest in terms of a storytelling point of view. There's a lot of stuff in this film. It feels very meandering.
Yes. I
So
think this one, yeah.
that did hurt it a bit.
Hmm.
But I liked it more than early summer.
This reminds me, speaking of those old men, by the way, they're in Autumn Afternoon and even funnier. It's the same three.
Oh, okay. Same three. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And those are his like last two films, I believe, or 60 and then 62, I think. Anyways,
Okay.
um, but they in early summer, there's a joke where she calls the guy mm, despicable or gross or something. Remember, like she calls this guy one of the older
Oh,
guys.
you're thinking of Late Spring,
Oh, that's Late Spring.
where she says that her father's friend got remarried, and she says that it's disgusting or something like the
Yeah.
concept of remarriage she uses a very particular word, but it's something like disgusting or despicable,
Yeah.
something like
But like
that.
she calls him that to his face and he just kind of
Yeah,
laughs.
yeah.
And then I think that sort of like directness is there in all of the movies between the characters, but it especially comes back, I think, in Late Autumn where you have this so the woman who's they're trying to marry off is Arayo or something like that. And then she has a friend named Yuriko,
Hmm.
and Yuriko is like this picture of like modern women in Japan,
Yes, I love her.
right?
She's
Yeah.
so good. She's
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
great character. I love when she comes into all her scenes are fantastic.
Great actor too, and just like written very well, I think.
Yes, very much.
And she's
She's
so
your
mm,
Yeah, it's just bold.
yeah,
She is like the personification of westernized Japan.
yeah, exactly. And she's so direct with these old men and like accuses them of being like scheming and like all these things, and like lying and like um so I think it's interesting how it seems like there's so much respect for the elders, but then at the same time, like there's a very direct style of communication. And like even the way people joke with each other, it's like I think in the West it would be called passive aggressive. Like we use that term like I think to
Hmm.
describe the way that they sort of talk to each other. But
Yeah,
it doesn't feel as passive aggressive, I don't think, in the movies. Like it feels more just sort of the way that like well, we both know this is happening and like you're drunk again. Like it just sort of like yeah, there's a disappointment, but like it's okay. Like it's just you're just the drunk guy, and like
that's
I'm
just
just
who
gonna
you are. It is what it is.
yeah, like I'm just gonna give you shit for being the drunk guy, but like I know I'm not expecting you to change. It's just sort of like um yeah. So anyways, I like that though. I think that was interesting in the movies. And I think Late Autumn that was the most pronounced. Like they were
Hmm.
the younger generation spoke back to the older generation the most directly and like most confrontational.
Yeah, like if you compare um the sort of two young female leads in this film, Akiko and I can't remember her friend's name.
Yuriko?
Yuriko, I think. Yeah, I think it's Akiko and Yuriko, I think.
I know for sure it's Yuriko. I can't remember the daughter's name, funny enough.
I think it's Akiko, or
We
maybe
can
it's
this
a
is
Yuko, or maybe Akiko is Setsukahara's name. Maybe I should just pull up the cat. This is gonna be easier if I just pull up.
this is definitely
The
something we can crack.
Yeah, hold on. This is not
Okay,
difficult.
Akiko is the mom.
I think it was the mom.
Ayako.
Okay, yeah.
Ayako is who I'm trying to think of.
Ayako and Yukiko. Okay. So
And yeah, Yuriko.
if
Yeah.
you compare how they
Or Yuki.
if you compare basically how they behave both to each other and to the parents and the older people, if you compare that to Noriko, it's like night and day. It's
Yeah.
like there's no way that Noriko would even think about speaking to
No.
her father in late spring the way that these characters behave.
Yeah.
It's it really shows the difference in the generations.
Yeah.
And I think, we talked you mentioned this in early summer. I think it's so pronounced here in late autumn, that sort of real difference between the younger westernized
Yeah.
generation who even, they all wear kind of normal, like when I say normal, I meant westernized, normal to us, westernized clothes and
Hmm.
stuff like that. You only see a Yaku wearing traditional garb during the sort of, you know, during those sort of religious moments that happen, like
That's right.
during the sort of remembrance mass for her father and stuff like that. That's the only time she wears traditional garb. Everywhere else, she's wearing dresses and suits and blouses and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it's a clear defined difference between, Sasuke Hara's character again, who you only see her wearing traditional garb. She
Hmm.
doesn't wear sort of westernized clothes or anything like that. So there's a clear defined line between that generation, this new generation, and how
Right.
they view society and just how they view romance and the idea of marriage and stuff like that. So like Ayuko is she's happy to date this boy and sort of have a romance and sort of, build a friendship and stuff, but that doesn't mean she's just gonna go marry him, because if she marries him, she's gonna leave her mom behind, which is obviously the main it's that's obviously the main issue of late spring
Yeah.
as well. This sort of idea of you don't want to leave, your parents alone and sort of move out and stuff like that. But in late spring, it's either Satsuko stays at home and never marries or has any romance, and that's her life, or she goes and gets married and barely sees her father again. So
Right.
there is no middle ground. Whereas in late autumn, that middle ground can exist. She can still live at home with her mom while also dating this boy and experiencing romance and stuff like that. So it in the space of whatever 10-ish years,
Hmm.
society has changed so much. The concepts of what people can do in
Yeah.
society has changed so much, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And this is kind of what I was mentioning earlier. Like, I think even though the films are a bit difficult to get through at times,
Yes, absolutely there.
to maybe really difficult to get through. And I will say I do not recommend starting late autumn at midnight the night before recording a podcast. Um, because it's quite slow. I had the exact same reaction to you. I got an hour in. I was like, okay, how am I doing? Ugh.
Yeah,
Um, but his movies do make sense, I think, as a group.
they do.
And the Noriko's character, although her name is not Noriko in Late Autumn, it's Akiko, I believe. But her character is it's cool and interesting to see the young Noriko. Then she gets a little bit older in late spring. She gets a little bit older in early summer. Now she's a mom in late autumn. Like, even though he's not making it about her, you can't help but watch this actress like kind of age and you see her relationship with the dad or in some cases the brother, like whatever, but like you see this relationship with Chisurio change over the time as well. Um, there's always elders, I think, in all these movies and like uh yeah, it's just I think his movies make sense collectively. Let me just say it that way. Like they start to kind of build on each other and become more interesting. Much in the same way when we were talking about Blow Up, the conversation, and Blow Out, like
Mhm.
seeing the same story sort of told different ways. I think this is, I had a similar reaction to this where I liked all of them more, like looking back, because like kind of getting to see this family and sort of, sort of family progress, um, than I did individually.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we mentioned earlier, where the films are a window into what society is like at that
Mhm.
time.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
as society progresses and changes, even though the base story stays the same, how the characters in society react to that base story changes over time. I think that's what
sure.
you can see in these films. The central idea is the same. The daughter needs to get married, but how the characters react to the daughter needing to get married is so different 10
Mm,
years apart, and in between that. That's why we joked that Otsu remade the same film over and over and over again. But in reality, it's only the base story that's the same.
sure.
How the characters react and behave is different in every one, because it's a look into how society is at that stage.
Yeah. I do want to give a shout out to his frequent collaborator, whose name is Kogo Noda.
Hmm.
Um, he was a writer on co-writer on
Screenwriter.
all these movies. Yeah. I don't know much about Kogo to be honest, but it just he was there present in all the stories as a screenwriter. So it seemed like maybe this was, maybe they had their own take on it or whatever, but Otsu was definitely the director. He had a lot of commercial hits. There's an interesting story where early on in his career he kind of started, and then the studio gave him the most successful actress to star, and that movie was a big hit, and so that kind of like launched his career. The fact that he could handle like their most successful actress at the time. Um, and so he was definitely like a director, but it seems like when he was telling these personal, like intimate culture stories, they were done through the lens of with this other with Kogo Nara or Nora. Um, anyways, but yeah, I don't know. Like I don't know what else there is to say about Otsu. Some people really love him.
Yes, yeah, he has a cult following.
Yeah.
Um, I get not really my cup, not I don't want to say not my cup of tea because I did somewhat enjoy the films. I can see why people like him. If if you're into this kind of uh I don't want to say this because we both actually we are both on the record as enjoying mumblecore. But if you're into this kind of slice of life filmmaking
Mm,
where you're not going to get a lot of action, it's just people, reacting to a very simple scenario, then I get it. I get why people will like it. I wouldn't be able to sit there and watch Otsu films every week.
no.
It's kind of like a once a year kind of a thing.
Mm.
So watching three in 3 days is enough Otsu for me now for probably for a long time.
For 2024.
Yeah, but I totally respect him as a filmmaker.
Hmm.
His directing and his framing and everything. Nobody else shoots films and sort
Mm.
of creates scenes like he did. So massive respect to him as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
I just unfortunately would not be able to sit down and watch his films every week.
The I'm the same boat. I found early summer and late autumn quite difficult to get through. I think if I had watched any one of them first, it probably would have been okay, but just like
Hmm. I
it
think it's
was
because late spring is such a high bar.
yeah,
It's
that's
such a
true.
high bar. And the fact that you watch Tokyo Story beforehand as well. You
And an
know,
autumn afternoon.
yeah, no, I can't speak on Not About Afternoon because I've never seen it, but like, of course you're going to be disappointed if you watch like what's
I
considered
see. I
his
see.
two
Yeah,
best
yeah, yeah, yeah.
films in Tokyo Story and Late Spring first, then everything else is going to feel like a disappointment
Yeah,
on the back of that, So
yeah, it's true. I was gonna joke around and say like here's a shit that O2 took, but that's not true because this is still in the top 1,000 of all time. Um,
yeah.
but it was a bit of a drag. Um, and I'm sorry for our Japanese listeners who love Otsu. One thing I did just kind of want to mention is that like the acting style of Chitsuryu
Mm.
is um, very interesting to me. Like he has a very specific cadence to his voice, and like even though his look changed, I mean, slightly. Like he was wearing glasses one time, or like had a beard one time. Like he was, you could always tell it was him. But even before the camera showed him, or if it was on the back of him or whatever, like you instantly knew it was him, right? He had this like he has a very particular voice, and like very particular just rhythm, the way he speaks and everything. And so I like t to me, like he sort of, I don't know if this is true, but like he has now become a proxy for like Japanese men in that like uh, traditional sort of Japanese men for me. Like he, he's so measured and like he drinks a lot, but but he's so measured and like he has his friends and like in I guess he's not in Late Autumn as much. He's only in there a bit. But they have
Mm.
those three jokers that are just sitting around drinking. They're more like maybe like a little bit more of like a transitional generation. And to me, Chitsuryu is just feels like a little bit more of like that older generation. Like he barely says anything, right? Most of the lines he says are like, mm, mm.
Mm.
And like there's so much dialogue that's just that, but like he does a good job of communicating some emotion like behind that, right? And um anyways, I like him a lot actually as an actor.
He's the yin to Toshiro Mifune's yang.
Oh my
If you want.
gosh, to think that they're working at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That's a great point, actually. Um, oh, speaking of that, so the very first, I really want to go try to track this down. 1927, the very first movie that Otsu was given a chance to direct was a swordplay movie called Sword of Penitence.
Okay, is that one of his
Um,
lost films? I was on his Wikipedia, and like
maybe.
most of his early films are lost.
Oh shoot, maybe then.
Yeah.
I was gonna go try to find it, so I hope that's not true.
Yeah, no, he has a ton of his sort of silent films. If you go onto Wikipedia, they're all just yeah, it's lost. His first film is his first one to his earliest
Uh,
surviving film is like his seventh film.
oh
One,
shoot,
two,
okay.
three, four, five, six, seven. His first seven films are considered lost. His earliest surviving film is a film called Student Romance Days of Youth, which is in 1929. He was
Sounds
very
terrible.
prolific in his early years.
Mm,
His first like between 1927 and the end of 1930, he made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 films in 3 years,
damn,
which is pretty insane.
damn, it's crazy.
So yeah, he was very prolific, but out of that, only five of them survived.
Mm,
All the rest are lost.
mm,
So we'll never really know for sure. In fact, most of his silent films are lost, to be honest. Just looking at the list here, most of his silent films are lost, unfortunately. His complete filmography is only really available from 1936 onwards, once he started filming in sound. Um, most of his lost films or
interesting,
most of his silent films are lost, unfortunately.
interesting. Okay, well, maybe I won't be watching it then. But I was fascinated to see his take on like a samurai, like, warrior film, because
Yeah.
it doesn't strike me as the type. But um, who knows? Maybe he makes a killer action flick too.
Yeah, you never know exactly. You
Yeah.
never know.
I'm trying to think if there's any like wrap up like musings I have on Otsu, and I don't know. Like I think for me, I'm kind of with you. Like I don't think I'm going to be spending a lot of time with his stuff. Um,
Mm.
if it comes up again, I'll watch it. I don't think it's not a bad movie to watch, right? Like it's okay. Um, I do feel like I've seen his take on life um a little bit. So if maybe there's a different genre or a different him just telling the story of a woman debating whether or not to get married and leave her parents behind. I feel like I'm good.
Yeah. Don't need to don't need to see any more on that topic.
I kind of get what he's saying about that. Um, but he definitely made other movies. I was thinking like, if I have a long day of like working on the house or like I don't know, being busy and just kind of, whatever, working and coming home and being tired. I don't think I would want to put on an Otsu movie. Like he doesn't seem
No.
like that kind of filmmaker to me, but it's weird because he's also not pretentious. Like there's nothing
No.
difficult about his movies. It's just so simple.
That's the thing. And Zach had asked us this when we were sort of recorded the last episode. Is he kind of like Bergman, where people think he's really pretentious, but it's actually really accessible? And like the answer is kind of yes. There's nothing inaccessible about these films except for the fact that there's just not a lot of action in them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's essentially just people in rooms talking.
Right.
Like, I don't think anybody can sit here and say that that's pretentious when that's just normal life.
Yeah.
He's just capturing life
Yeah.
in the simplest kind of form. So,
More accessible than Bergman, I think, even.
oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. In terms of like, yeah, like if I was gonna choose whether to show a casual film watcher, Tokyo Story um or something like Persona or
Uh-huh. Right.
Power of the Wolf or something,
Right.
I think they're
Right.
gonna
Right.
get a lot more out of Tokyo Story than they would
Right.
out of Bergman. Not to say obviously Bergman's great. We love Bergman on this podcast. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but in terms of like simplicity of storytelling, for sure, Otsu wins in that regard.
Yeah, there's no layers. It's just like here's the story, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
tell it well, and I'm not gonna move the camera for 6 minutes
Or at all, yeah, just
or ever.
static shots all the time,
Mm.
which I like. As I said, I really like how he sets up his films.
Hmm.
They're great looking, so
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain.
The this we can end it. Sorry, I'm just last thought. This whole thing about British kitchen sink dramas.
Yeah,
Do you think they like are they kind of like inspired by Otsu a little bit? Do you think?
like like every country has its realism, you
Yeah.
know. Like every country has had its time where it wants to just tell real stories about real
Mm.
people. Italy
Hmm.
had it post-war, same as Japan. France had it kind of pre-war. Obviously the British kitchen sink stuff was more 70s and stuff like
Right.
that. So like I don't think I can say yes definitively Otsu is an influence here because I don't think stylistically anything is like Otsu, as I mentioned. Anything that I've seen anyway, apart from maybe like Wes Anderson or something. Um, but I think every country at one point is going to want to tell real stories, and it's kind of reflective of what's happening politically at the time. You know, a lot of the kitchen sink stuff came out during like the Thatcher years, where
Mm.
there was a lot of a want for normal people to tell how normal people were living and struggling
Okay. Okay.
in those years. So I don't think it's kind of a deflect or a direct influence from Otsu per se. It's just usually, countries go through periods where the artists want to tell the stories of the real people who are kind of living and suffering and dealing with issues in that time.
So, okay, sorry. This will be the last thing I say, I promise. But you just sparked an idea. Like you had this guy working who was telling very real, like simple human stories, and then you had Suzuki coming out, and then you also had the Battles Without Honor and Humanity guy. I remember his
Fuka,
name. Hmm?
Fuka
Oh,
something.
Fukasaku. Yes, thank you, Kenji
Fukasaku, yeah.
Fukasaku. Uh, that were like looking. They came out. I mean, Suzuki was working, but like their most famous movies were made a little bit later, like 50s, 60s, looking back at the war and kind of like, especially Fukasaku, I guess I'm thinking of, is like all of his kind of crime stories were looking like 15 years after the war, like looking back on it, seeing the influence it had. And so maybe there was even like sort of this break where society wanted to like mourn and like grieve and like tell these stories together. And then as it got a little bit later, you could almost like look back and like tell it from a slightly different angle. All this Fukusaku stuff is like hyper violent and like crazy, right? But maybe that would be a little bit too much to come out in 1949. Like you wouldn't want that story then. It's like too raw.
Yeah.
But with a little bit of distance, that story becomes more popular, I think, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know. That's my that's my thesis on Japanese cinema.
Cool. So we'll wrap up the Otsu stuff.
Mm,
So as I said, this week, well, the next week is Zach's picks. He's not here, but he did tell us what we're going to be watching, so we can let you guys know. Very much the opposite of Otsu movies. We should have expected at some point that Zach was going to sick Nicolas Cage on us.
yep.
So essentially, Zach's theme for the next time is exploring movies that actors made after winning an Oscar.
Hmm.
So these films that we're going to watch, I believe, are after he won an Oscar for, is it Leaving Las Vegas? He
Hmm.
won the Oscar for, I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure. I don't remember the year it was. But these
90s.
were three films. Yeah, it was 94, 92, something somewhere in the
95.
early 95. Yeah, I knew it was kind of early mid 90s.
Mhm.
So these were some films that Nicolas Cage made after winning his Oscar. So we're going to be watching the James Cameron epic The Rock. JK, it's Michael Bay. We're going to be watching Con Air, and we're going to be watching what I consider to be one of the greatest pieces of schlock ever made, Face Off.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm very excited. I've seen The Rock and I've seen Face Off many, many, many years ago. We're talking like 10, 15 or so, probably 15 years ago. I've never seen Con Air, so I'm looking forward to that one.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is going to be next episode is going to be the opposite of Otsu.
Mhm.
We're
Mhm.
going to go from very simple family stories to Nick Caging it up in action romps. So it's going to be, I think next episode is going to be a lot of fun.
Mhm. And we'll do our best to tell it through the lens of an Otsu story.
We will not be doing that. Perfect. We're going to wrap up there. Happy New Year to all of our listeners. We're looking forward to what the year is going to bring. We might do more of this YouTube stuff. So again, hi if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening on the normal podcast stuff, we're going to try and do more YouTube stuff if that's your thing. But we'll mention that as they come out. Don't be expecting weekly uploads from us by any means. Cool. We're gonna wrap things up there. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks, Adam.
And
Thanks, all.